Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Tuesday, June the 6th. And today we're going to look at some of the big stories in the front pages. We're also going to go back for a huge event in the 20th century, and that was D-Day on this day in 1944. We're also going to remember the fact that Robert Kennedy died on this day in 1968. But let's begin with some of the current news. I have a post over at the American Thinker this morning regarding Senator Sanders. As you know, Senator Sanders ran in 2016 as the big populist. You know, he was running against, I guess, the unfairness and the rich people and all of that. Well, it turns out that he made $1 million in 2016. A lot of it coming from book sales, a lot of it coming from speeches, a lot of it just, well, he made money. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I wish I could make $1 million. I wish I could sell as many books as Mr. Sanders. The difference is, of course, I'm not running around bashing capitalism or running around bashing people who make money or saying that they should pay more in taxes or whatever. And I think it's a problem for him and for people like Senator Sanders, because I think it questions their credibility. You know, you have to ask yourself the following question. You know, why is he making that much money? Why doesn't he just give it away and actually live up to his rhetoric? So I don't know how much of a future Senator Sanders has, not necessarily because of the story regarding his $1 million, but just in general. I mean, he's a man in his mid-70s. He had a lot of success in 2016, but that's because the party has gone so far to the left that a man who was not even a Democrat, a man who I'm not even sure what he was, whether he was a socialist or an independent, I don't know. But a man who a generation ago would have never gotten within 20 miles of a Democrat convention actually came in second in this year in the delegates. And you never know. I mean, if the Democrat Party had not done everything under the sun to make it or to open the door for Hillary Clinton, I mean, they basically went after and did all kinds of things to take it away from or keep it from Senator Sanders. You never know. If that had been a straight one-on-one and honest one-on-one race, you never know. He came very close. He came very close, and he clearly was winning voters, particularly young voters and so on. So, I mean, he obviously had a big year in 2016. But I also think, looking ahead, that this Democrat Party has to move to the center, and they have to get younger. Their nominees have to get younger. The candidates running for president have to get younger. And they haven't done that yet. Now, 3-4 years is a long time, and there's a lot of politics ahead. But I don't think Senator Sanders is going to be one of the forces of the party in years to come. I think he saw his day, had his moment, his 15 minutes of fame, as they like to say, and he put up a pretty good campaign. Let's be honest about it. But I think it's all behind him now. I really don't see Senator Sanders as a major Democrat in the future. But he did make $1 million, and that's something. That's a pretty good accomplishment. That puts him right up there with President Obama, the other millionaire of the Democrat Party. Another big story today is this NSA leaker who turns out to be a 25-year-old young woman who is as we understand it, again, the information is a bit sketchy, but what we're getting is that she's a huge Sanders supporter. She's 25 years old, and she was apparently very active in social media with her anti-Trump messages. My question is, what is she doing handling information of this type? And how could she leak it? I mean, it just seems to me that there's a problem here when a 25-year-old, a person who is actively supporting a candidate, who's apparently doing so in social media, what is a person like that doing handling important national security information? It just doesn't add up to me. And that's another question I would ask, the people at the NSA is, how does she get that job? And how does she keep it? I mean, because I was always under the impression that the NSA would keep an eye on you. And if you were engaging in potentially irresponsible behavior, such as going on social media and promoting one candidate or another, that you wouldn't be necessarily the kind of person they would have. So I think there's a lot more to this, nor do I think she's the only one. that will be indicted. I think there will be others, and hopefully others up the chain, a little higher up the chain, because I just don't think a 25-year-old is responsible for all the leaks here. I think there have to be people on top of her, people who were more responsible, had more authority, who were engaging in this kind of behavior as well. So we'll keep an eye on this story, but this could be huge. This could be huge over the next few weeks, and the Trump administration has made it very clear, and I'm glad they're doing it. They're going after the leakers. It is a crime to leak information of this type. I don't care who you voted for. It is a crime to leak this kind of information. Speaking of leaks and speaking of controversies, former Director Comey is going to be going before Congress, I guess, on Thursday, and I have a post about this coming out tomorrow where I say I think it's going to be really boring. I mean, they're building this up like, you know, the biggest event in the history of civilization, that all this information is going to come out. I really don't see it. I really don't see what information is going to come out here. I mean, what's he going to say? Is he going to say, well, you know, President Trump really didn't say anything that I thought was or could be considered as obstruction of justice? Or he may say, well, yeah, he did, but I decided not to resign. I mean, it's kind of silly. He doesn't really have many options. And from what I understand, what we're hearing in the media is it looks like he's just going to say, yeah, he did talk to me about it, but I don't think he was trying to push me one way or the other. That's kind of the way I think it's going to come out, that he was saying that. I think at the end of the day, this hearing is going to be a big bust. I just don't think there's anything significant that will come out, except we may begin to have some revelations, and maybe we're maybe getting some information about the unmasking of U.S. citizens. Because the fact is that it does look like the Obama administration, and again, we don't know 100%, but it looks that way. It looks like there was some unmasking being done here of American citizens. That would be a very bad thing. And if the intelligence departments or committees, not committees, but agencies, were being used for political reasons, that's a huge crime. And that's something that if the Obama administration was engaged in that, and again, we say if because we really don't know 100%, although it does look like it could have happened, that could be a major scandal, and somebody's going to have to pay for that. You just don't do stuff like that and get away with it. So I think that may very well be the biggest news that comes out of this hearing, because I understand Senator Graham and Senator Paul are going to be at that session, and they're the ones who are publicly saying that they really feel that there was unmasking or that there was they were tapping their phones or whatever. So we'll see how that turns out. I think that could be the big story of the hearing, not all this other stuff about Trump and Russia and all of that. I think that's frankly not much of anything. We're going to take a little break. We'll be right back. Well, let's get back to our topics today. We're talking about Director Comey going to Congress in a few days. Senator Sanders releasing his 2016 salary report. The guy made over $1 million. And, of course, there's information about the NSA leaker, which is amazing to me that such a young person would have access to that kind of information. There's also more information coming out of the UK. There's a report that there are 23,000 jihadists in the UK, potential jihadists, I should say, people who are potential terrorists. And according to the UK government, they can only keep track of about 3,000 of them. This is a huge problem for the UK and probably for the rest of Europe as well, because other countries are doing just as poorly. Unless they take control of this situation, which is going to be very difficult to do, they're going to make it very difficult for people to feel safe in their own country. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was a citizen of the UK, I would not feel very confident about my government protecting me. I would feel very much like, hey, you know, I got to take care of myself. I got to protect my family, because if I'm out for a walk or whatever and there's a terrorist attack, I want to be able to defend myself and I want to be able to defend my family. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a movement in the UK in favor of letting people carry guns. Certainly letting the police carry guns so that they can at least protect you at the moment that a terrorist attack occurs. But 23,000 potential terrorists, that is a problem that I don't think they have a clue of how to address. We mentioned that Robert F. Kennedy was killed on this day in 1968. He actually died on June 6th. He was actually shot the night before, June 5th. He had just won the California primary. He had delivered the speech, and when he was leaving the podium and I guess cutting through the hotel cafeteria or the hotel kitchen, that's where he was shot by a man named Sirhan Sirhan, who is currently in prison in California. There's a lot of speculation as to whether Kennedy would have won the nomination that year. I don't know. Nobody really knows. But the fact is that Vice President Humphrey was also seeking the nomination, and Vice President Humphrey had the support of President Johnson. So I think it would have been a very contested primary the rest of the way, probably a very contested convention. I think Humphrey would have gotten it eventually, but you never know. Kennedy was extremely popular. So Robert Kennedy died on this day in 1968. Of course, the big event of June 6, 1944 was D-Day, the landing of D-Day. And a few years ago, when they celebrated the 70th anniversary of D-Day in 2014, we did a special show with a friend of mine here at church, a gentleman by the name of Bob Jaggers, who was a very young man on that day. He was part of the Marine operation. He didn't actually land in the first day. He went in later, but he was out in one of the ships, and so he was there. He could see the operation, and we had a chat with him, sort of reliving that moment. One of the problems with the veterans of D-Day, of course, that most of them are in their mid-90s, like my friend Bob Jaggers, and so they're dying. World War II veterans are dying at a pace of about 572 a day. It's obviously an older population. As I say, most of them are in their mid-90s, and that would be a young one. After all, this happened in 1974, so if you were 20 years old, you'd be 94 today. That's just the way to look at it. Some of them were older than 20, of course, so they would be in their late 90s. Many have, in fact, passed away. But this is a great generation. These were great soldiers. These were great young men who were basically thrown into this. I mean, the circumstances in life, circumstances in their country's history brought them together, and they created the greatest army ever put together. And D-Day was one of the great military operations of all time, of course, headed by General Eisenhower, who eventually became President Eisenhower. So we salute all the men, as well as their families, of D-Day 1944, and to my friend Bob Jaggers, good health and many more. And to any one of you listening who either had a relative at D-Day or yourself were at D-Day, hey, we're very proud of you. And we remember you today on this great 73rd anniversary of D-Day, one of the greatest days of the 20th century. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you later.